Support for this episode comes from Unleashed with the Dingo and Danny, a new podcast fueled by Monster Energy, with new episodes dropping every 2 weeks on Mondays. Unleashed is the alternative sports podcast you've been waiting for. Get inside the minds of groundbreaking athletes from the world of skateboarding, snowboarding, BMX, MMA fighting, and more. Tune in now on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube or monsterenergy.com for the latest episode of Unleashed with the Dingo and Danny. Fueled by Monster Energy.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Today, as we are closer and closer to the draft, I talk to former Washington safety and ESPN analyst, Matt Bowen, one of my favorites to talk to whenever, whether it's for this or even just in a regular conversation on the phone where it's just he and I. He studied the quarterbacks, so we talk a lot about the quarterbacks in this class, especially those of interest here, including Davis Mills from Stanford and Florida's Kyle Trask, as well as guys at the top of the draft. He talks about Justin Fields, things that he learned while studying Justin Herbert last year that he is applying now this year to his analysis of Fields. Plus, we talk a lot about linebackers and safeties. He gives you a couple safeties to watch after the first round and other areas of interest for Washington. He compared Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker from Notre Dame, to a former Panther linebacker. I always love talking to Matt. He's absolutely one of the best analysts around. Don't forget, you can follow Matt on Twitter at MattBowen41 and watch him on ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. There will be 2 draft specials in the next week or so with the Matchup crew. Check it out. And you can read my work on ESPN.com. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at JohnKeimESPN. Before I share my conversation with Matt, a couple things. Let's talk smoke screens because that word kind of gets used a lot these days. Not kind of, it does get used a lot. And I get asked about how often do teams lie to you? Do they lie to you a lot? And have you seen them in the past doing that? And I'll just say this. If they're blatantly lying, they damage the relationship that you have with them. And I think most people involved understand that because the one thing you have to have here is trust. And while there may be sometimes a guy might lie a little bit, I don't think it's going to be so overt or so maybe so deep, I guess I should say, that, you know, they're going to be a little bit lies here and there. I get that, but I don't think they're going to be so blatant at times with this because, again, you damage a relationship. So you may get away with it here, but it's going to damage that relationship throughout the rest of the year. And you have to understand that. I can't say that people in the building had just flat out lied to me. Sometimes it's hard to know because after the fact, you may not know, but usually what happens is they may just play down a guy they really like or want, and maybe they just don't share that information about that particular player. Maybe they go overboard on another guy that they do kind of like, but maybe they like somebody else more. That's part of the game, and I understand that. Teams don't share a whole lot right now anyways. I do hear things without a doubt, absolutely hear things. And it's not just coming from in the building. Sometimes, I'm going to get a lot of stuff outside there, but I'm going to get some stuff from inside. There are times I might ask somebody something, and they might not answer. In some ways, that's kind of my answer, but it's not something I can really report because how do I say that? A source who didn't respond to this question, well, that's not a confirmation, but it does certainly lead me to believe that there may be something to this particular player, and rather than lie, don't respond. I'm cool with that. Just don't, again, I get some of the stuff that you may do, but when you're just flat out lying a lot, it damages a relationship, and that's never a good thing. Now, I will say, and sometimes, like going back to the text, they just won't respond. So rather than lying, just don't respond. And that's happened over the years with a lot of people. A lot of the smoke screens can come from agents who have a vested interest in their guy, playing their guy up. I remember in 2011, there were reports leading in as we got close to the draft that Washington was interested in drafting quarterback Blaine Gabbert. Well, based on my intel, there was no shot at that happening. And I just kind of scoffed at any reports about that because I knew what my intel was based on. It was specific dislikes of his game, not just playing down an interest. And there's a difference. If they say, I don't like that he sees the rush too much. Well, I know that kind of eliminates him. So sure enough, Washington traded out of that spot where it could have drafted him. So my sense at the time was that was his agent trying to drum up interest in his guy, or somebody else trying to drum up trade interest in that. That definitely happens. Maybe the smokescreen comes based on what Carolina puts out, possibly drafting a quarterback at number 8. In some ways, that's why Washington kept alive the notion that maybe it would take a quarterback at number 2. Well, that really was never going to happen. And I never really went strong with that because I knew better. But it was done in part you did mention as a possibility, but really not that. But it was done, I know, from their end to try and maybe entice a team to see if they would trade up and what they could get for that number 2 pick. When you're drafting at 19, there are so many scenarios that exist, and to rule anything out now would be silly. That's why trading into the top 10, probably the back end for a player, is not out of the question. Is it likely? Well, it's really hard to say because we don't know how the picks will unfold. So how can you say for sure? Nobody can. They don't know. There will be so anybody who says they know, that's BS. Nobody knows. There will be multiple players they like. You can never target one guy at 19. They could trade up a few spots for a linebacker or a tackle. I know that's an option. It's a definite option. They could trade back if those guys are gone and they failed to move up. I would do what I could to add another pick in the first few rounds for next offseason, simply because that draft could be stacked with a lot of players going back to school for another season, or who didn't come out because they felt like they needed that year to develop, and they go back in. Next year could be a pretty strong class, especially at the top. Anyway, I just know that it's not always the teams that are lying, though some will spread falsehoods, and they might mention a few guys they'd be okay with, but leave out again the guys that they really want. That's how it should be. I had heard that Carolina knew Washington would end up taking Dwayne Haskins a couple years ago because of all the stuff that was coming out of here in the days leading up to the draft, and certainly on the day of the draft. It allowed them to feel okay not trading up to get the guy they wanted, defensive end Brian Burns, or defensive end / linebacker Brian Burns. That's why it's important to be on the same page with all the info, and this group is. I will say in the past, there are times where you would hear like, well, here are at 17, here are 5 guys that we like. Well, depending on who you talk to, you could get a different feel for what they might do, because person X might like this particular player. Person Y might want this player. But Bruce Allen or Dan Snyder may want this guy. And that's what happened a lot. I know that that happened a few times with this group. But when you get that, and if you feel like your voice isn't being heard, you tend to get leaks. And that's what happened there. And that's not what's happening now. So you can take some solace in that. Anyway, what I do know, Kyle Trask and Davis Mills are quarterbacks to watch on day 2. We'll go from there. Here's a little bit of info for you. So I went back, and I don't know what to make of this, but I'm going to give it to you anyways. Went back and looked at what Martin Mayhew did as a general manager of Detroit in the first round, and what Carolina did when either Marty Hurney or Ron Rivera were there. In Mayhew's 8 drafts, 6 of the first round picks were linemen, including 2 offensive linemen. In Carolina's 18 drafts, where either Hurney or Rivera were either in charge or key decision maker, they took an offensive lineman only 2 of 18 times in the first round. 4 times they picked a linebacker in the first round. With Rivera as a coach, they took 4 offensive linemen combined in the first 3 rounds of from his entire regime. What does it mean? Well, they look for impact or skill positions, ends, linebackers, receivers. In those 18 drafts, they took more running backs in the first round, I think it was 3, than they took offensive linemen. To be honest, I don't know if this is meaningless or not. 18 drafts is more than a trend, but you also go based on what the talent is there. And there are many ways to build a line. But anyway, I found it interesting because I did the homework, so I thought I'd share with you. I also think that Mayhew is really good at seeing the big picture based on everybody I've talked to about him. And I think in these scenarios, that helps quite a bit. And I do know that Rivera has been very adamant about building a really strong offensive line. And he's been very adamant about, and he said it again in the press conference a couple of days ago, about wanting to make sure that, when he was in Carolina, they got Cam Newton and they built around him. I think they're taking the opposite approach of building a foundation and offense and then getting the quarterback. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, I'll have more draft info during the week and a few more episodes before the draft. But for now, let's get to Matt Bowen. So after this break, I will be back with ESPN's Matt Bowen as we discuss his breakdowns of quarterback Davis Mills, among others, and other quarterbacks he likes in this draft. We touched on a few of them, plus a few linebackers.
Support for this podcast comes from Wild Turkey Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Let's tune in to their one-on-one with Jamal, a real bartender from Old Fourth Ward in Atlanta.
I really get into the backstory of whatever I'm pouring, out of respect. There are literally years of experience behind these bottles. Wild Turkey, same recipe since 1942. If you want a true classic, this is what you want to order.
Wild Turkey. Wild Turkey Distilling Company, Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. Copyright 2020, Campari American, New York, New York. Never compromise, drink responsibly.
I'm Byron Kerr, host of Curly W. I've spent 15 years covering baseball and the Washington Nationals. My Curly W podcast will give you the opportunity to visit with Nats players, current and former, as well as coaches and coordinators at the major and minor league levels. We will jump into the 21 campaign and look back at how the Nats got here and what prospects are close to making it to the show. Subscribe to Curly W wherever you get your podcasts. Another great show from Empire Media.
Welcome back. Now here's my conversation with ESPN's Matt Bowen. Well, Matt, I always enjoy having you on. Always great insight. I do want people to go look at your story you just wrote for ESPN Plus, which is the player comps for, I think it was like 15 of the prospects. Right. I think there's one interesting one in there that I want to get to in a few minutes when we talk about linebackers as it pertains to Washington. But you've studied the quarterbacks, and I want to start with quarterbacks. And I want to start with some guys who maybe are day two picks that will intrigue Washington. Let's start with Davis Mills. I think he's a guy that is on Washington's radar without a doubt. What's your take on what have you seen from Davis Mills in your studies?
You have to start with Davis Mills, John. He's a former 5-star recruit. And obviously, I coach at the high school level, and I've had people say, well, what does that matter? It does matter because he has 5-star traits. You don't lose those traits throughout your college career. Now, Davis Mills does not have a lot of in-game experience. He's played less games than Trey Lance. But you have to look at what he brings from, a traits perspective is projecting it to the National Football League. I think he's got a big-time arm, John. I think he throws with anticipation and location. And he can vary ball speeds. That's important. And when I talk about vary ball speeds, obviously it's the arm talent to attack all levels of the field. We understand that. But also the ability to throw with pace and touch. You see that on his film. I think he's a good mover inside the pocket. He doesn't have elite movement traits. That's been a big discussion about the top 5 quarterbacks with Mac Jones versus a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance. Davis Mills is not going to have a ton of second reaction ability, but can he develop to a point where he can move within the pocket? Can he slide, climb up, reset his throwing window? Does he have enough ability to escape and extend and get to the edge of the pocket? I think he does have that. But it's the arm talent for me. The 5-star traits coming out of high school. I like his film. Now, is his film a finished product? Not even close.
Right.
But you do see signs or flashes on the tape where I look at a player and I say, okay, he has what I call, John, developmental upside. I don't think he's an immediate starter in the NFL, but can he be someone in terms of a team like Washington where he plays behind a Ryan Fitzpatrick, where he learns from a Ryan Fitzpatrick? Now, ultimately, John, and you and I have talked about this for a long time, you have to play. You have to play. You have to get game reps. Doesn't matter if you're talking about a safety. Doesn't matter if you're talking about a linebacker. But obviously, for a quarterback, you have to play and make those mistakes. But I think he does have upside. And you're seeing that. Some mocks have him in late first round. I don't think he's a late one. I think he's a day 2 pick. But again, pocket size, pro arm, the ability to process, throw with anticipation and location. And I'll say this, John, because I get caught in it too. You spend so much time on the second reaction ability, right?
Right.
Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, like we mentioned, Trey Lance, Justin Fields. You have to master the routine throws first.
Right.
You have to. You have to master A, B, and C first. Because those are the throws you routinely have to make in the National Football League. The ability to throw with location, anticipation, and rhythm and time. I think with Davis Mills, if you're talking about his ceiling, that's what he'll be. He'll be a pocket thrower that can move and maneuver and navigate inside the pocket, but ultimately make the routine throws. And then you can scheme him up within a pro offense, more defined reads, defined throws, and your scheme verticals down the field.
I'm sure you probably watched his game too, the Cal game. He was pretty good in that game. And there were 2 plays in there that I remember seeing. It was I think they may have been back to back or they were pretty close together, where he throws like a little, I think it was a hitch route, but it was on time and in rhythm. And then the next play, he gets chased up in the pocket, and as he's being chased up, he has to dump a little floater over the linebacker to, I think, a back, and it was just a perfectly thrown ball, just a little dump pass. But it showed a couple different attributes that he had. And even in that game, you talk about the anticipation. I think there were a couple times he got in trouble with the anticipation, but not necessarily. Sometimes there were 1 or 2 times because of a throw, but sometimes it's because the receiver is getting bumped off their route. And so it messes up that, but it's still the right throw, but it kind of messed things up. But I felt like that game showed a lot in him.
And you have to understand, John, we can go to take on Trevor Lawrence. You're going to find situations where you can't anticipate quicker. There's going to be a developmental process or growth process for all these young quarterbacks. Everyone has to understand it. Some have higher level traits. Some have higher ceiling. Now, Trevor Lawrence, he's at the highest ceiling, probably the highest floor in this class as well. When I look at Justin Fields and Trey Lance, incredibly high ceilings. Okay, do they have the floor of a Mac Jones? I don't know that. That's for evaluators to tell you. But I look at the ceiling in those situations. With Davis Mills, I do think he has a high ceiling as a pocket thrower. And ultimately, as we all know, that's where you have to win.
Right.
You have to win from the pocket. If you can't throw from the pocket, all the other traits don't matter.
What do you think he loses by only playing 11 games?
Well, it's a smaller sample size. You don't see enough game situations like you've seen with Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones. They played longer. Now, Mac Jones is only a 1-year starter. We understand that. But I just don't think you see enough NFL situations. That's all it is. You're projecting more. But again, this is I said this, and we could talk about this later, but I'll bring it up now. Okay, I missed on Justin Herbert last year. Okay, what I mean by missed is I said, I don't really know, because there was concerns on his college tape. There was concerns. And he played a heavy college spread offense, throwing key screens.
Right.
I said he was a see it, throw it quarterback. What I meant by that is he would wait for the window to open. Okay. Right. The difference you have to look at there is I didn't bet on the traits. You have to bet the traits. You have to bet on the traits. That's why I look at a quarterback like Justin Fields. Obviously, as an Ohio State grad, you understand Justin Fields. You got to bet on the traits with Justin Fields. He's 6'3", 230, elite physical tools inside the pocket, outside the pocket. Those are the traits you have to bet on. And with Davis Mills, if I'm evaluating him, I'm going to bet on his traits as a thrower, because I've seen enough of it on film to say he can do it. Now let's put him in our offense. Let's develop him. Let's coach him up. I have to trust my coaching staff to do that. And I have to trust my system that it will fit his traits.
And it's funny, Matt, because that's been a big topic for me, and as an Ohio State guy, because even I want to get to some of these top guys in a few minutes, but just the last part on the Justin Fields thing for now with the traits, when people are saying, oh, well, what Ohio State quarterback ever did, is like, don't look at the school, look at the traits, because the traits are what translate to the NFL. And they haven't had a guy with his traits at that school, I don't think, ever. So I think it's, but I agree with you. You got to look at the traits. One of those guys too that they're going to look at on day 2 would be Kyle Trask. What's your take on him? And after, as you get into that, how do you feel he compares to a Davis Mills as a prospect?
I think Davis Mills has higher traits as a thrower. I'll say that right now. Now, Kyle Trask, I think he's in the NFL, John. He'll have to be a rhythm and timing thrower. In a heavily schemed offense with those defined throws, especially intermediate throws in the middle of the field. I think he's very good in terms of placement and timing in middle of the field throws, or intermediate throws, if you want to call them that. Now, he, again, like Davis Mills, like Mac Jones, he is not an elite mover. He doesn't have those movement traits. But the best thing I think about Kyle Trask is his pocket movement. I think he's really good inside the pocket. You see a ton of that on the tape in terms of his ability to slide, square his shoulders, reset his throwing window, and deliver a catchable football. So, again, does he have the traits of Davis Mills as a thrower? No, I don't. I think Davis Mills is going to have a higher grade. I think Davis Mills will come off the board first. But I think Kyle Trask is going to have to be a developmental number 2 within your system that you can scheme around. Okay, talent around him, build an offense around him, and put him in a situation where he can make those timing and rhythm throws and trust him, even though he doesn't have great movement traits, that if he does feel pressure, you see enough on his Florida tape against SEC competition. That's the thing about the SEC last year. There was no weeks off. It was all in-conference play. So he played high-quality competition, very productive, and his ability to slide and reset his window in the pocket, that transfers to the NFL, because we see the pocket quarterbacks. And look, I'm not making this comparison. And let's just put that out there now. But when we look at the elite pocket throwers in the NFL, a Breeze or a Brady, what do they do so well? They navigate and master inside the tackle, right? Because they're not elite movers. But they are so good at finding that throwing window where they can reset their platform and throw. that makes him high level.
Right. And Peyton Manning couldn't move, but he could move in the pocket. And that's all you need to do. I am curious for you as a safety. This was not your position, but you had a unique position analyzing quarterbacks. That's what you've always done to see. What are the first things that you look at in a quarterback because of your experience as a safety?
But because of my experience and now coaching football, and this might sound different, the first thing I look for is a physical element of the position. I really think that's important. The toughness, the intangibles of the position, both inside, outside the pocket, or as a ball carrier. You look at Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance. When they run the football, whether off script or design runs, they have ball carrier vision, they have ball carrier toughness. That shows in the tape. Now, processing ability is important. There's no doubt about it. But like I said, with every one of these quarterbacks, you're going to find situations in the tape you say, that's going to have to be faster in the NFL.
Right.
It's no different than telling me coming out of Iowa that you better come out of your breaks faster, you're going to get beat. Right? It's the same thing. You're going to have to make that transition and adjust to NFL speed. I do think arm talent matters. I do think it matters. I think you have to have enough arm talent. You don't have to have Josh Allen's arm. Okay, right. You have to have enough arm talent, but I use the term attack all levels of the field. The ability to navigate traffic, like we talked about with Kyle Trask. I think the movement traits are important, but they're different type of movement traits. Obviously, Fields, Lance, and Lawrence, they can get outside the pocket, create off schedule. Zach Wilson, we understand that. Zach Wilson's got the top. If you're talking about second reaction ability, he's the best in this class at creating off script or off schedule. And I look at the routine throws. You got to master the routine throws like we talked about. But that toughness, the intangibles, that's one of the first things I look for. Then you look at the traits. And if you're drafted in the top 10, you want quarterbacks with high-level traits.
Right.
That's what you want. And accuracy and location obviously are very important. I use the term a runner's ball, and you see that a lot with Trevor Lawrence. But the runner's ball is, John, if you're throwing a crosser, an over route, or a deep end breaker, you want to put that ball in the upfield shoulder so they don't break stride. That leads to, obviously, catch and run opportunities. Trevor Lawrence is excellent at that. But all these quarterbacks, you can look at situations on their film, especially the guy with high-level traits. You see it a lot with – not a lot, but you've seen it in instances with Justin Fields, that Indiana game, right? Yeah. Where they reduce sometimes, they rely so much on their high-level traits because they are five-star players with those five-star traits. And sometimes that gets them into negative situations, okay? But, again, that can be coached. And you expect it. And I've seen it at the high school level. Now, obviously, we don't have I'm not coaching Justin Fields. I would like to coach Justin Fields, but you see it with the top players in the team that sometimes they lean too much on their physical tools. Okay, and that's just coaching, that's just development, that's just reps. But really, those categories I look at there, it's the mental processing, the physical tools, the ability to move, the ability to attack all levels, vary your ball speeds, ability to throw with touch and pace, and location is very important. And I think location and accuracy are different.
Oh, very different. I don't think people always people look at completion percentage. To me, it's, are you giving a guy the chance to run after the catch? That is accuracy. And it's the shoulder, and there's like 8 inches difference, but it could be in the difference between 10 more yards or none. And so I'm with you on that. Is there a quarterback beyond those two in a day 2, day 3 situation is there one guy that you say, I really like this guy after those two?
Well, I think you have to look at Kellen Mond from Texas A&M, right? Mm-hmm. Kellen Mond has a lot of college experience in the SEC conference. I think Kellen Mond has dual threat traits. You can scheme for him, get him on the move. You look at the Texas A&M tape last year. I thought it was very good for Kellen Mond. There's a lot of play action, a lot of pro concepts. Mm-hmm. I think that's what he's going to be in the NFL. He's going to be in a play action heavy offense, which gives him more defined reads. He can create off schedule. He's got enough arm talent. He's very good at throwing on the run. Okay, and sometimes you don't quantify that as a key trait, but we see how many boot concepts we see every Sunday, John. A ton of them. Yeah. That's the game right now. It's misdirection, grabbing the eyes of the defense, and getting your quarterback to the edge of the pocket so you can give him more defined reads, more clear throws, and more clear throwing reads. Well, I think Kellen Mond has day 2 traits. There's no question about that. Now, where he goes, I don't know that, but he's in that mix of the second tier. And, once you get past the top 5 quarterbacks, I think the next 3 are going to be Mills, Trask, and Mond. And I do think out of those 3, I would grade Davis Mills high as the highest.
Yeah, I would too. And I the more I've watched it, and the more I do like that kid. And it's funny with Mond because all these other guys were, except for like Trevor Lawrence, because he's played a lot more. Mond has played a lot of games, and he fits that category like where the experience is like, that's what you want. And whereas everybody else, you're betting on upside. It almost seems like he's being held back because we've seen more of him. And it may be like, there may be these other guys that just feel they have higher level traits, but he has played a lot. He's got that experience that everybody says they want.
No, I agree with that. And you got a lot of tape to watch with Kellen Mond.
Yeah.
You can watch his college development and then try to project that in terms of his pro development. And I like the offense he played in. And understand, when we talk about traits matter first, but also the offense he played in, I think some of that will transition to the NFL.
As far as we'll go a couple minutes on the top couple guys. Well, I'm going to leave Wilson and Lawrence aside because, I think, after those guys, Mac Jones, Trey Lance and Justin Fields, this team, I've been told they haven't ruled out trading in the top 10. I don't know that it's likely. I think you keep every scenario alive because what if you can get a good offer to move up to get a guy you like? Which of those three, is there a guy that you say, is there a guy you like more out of that group?
I'd probably say Justin Fields, but I think it's close. Obviously, the talk about Mac Jones is very popular right now, right? Because we, assume, just anticipate that could be Kyle Shanahan moving up to get Mac Jones. And what that tells you about the Niners, one, that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan believe in their current roster construction that they can make a run.
Right.
It also tells you that they believe in Kyle's ability to evaluate the quarterback position because this is his pick.
Right.
Now, do I think Mac Jones would fit in San Francisco? Of course I do. Mac Jones is that anticipation, timing rhythm thrower who throws with high-level location. You put him in a defined play action passing game where he hits that back foot and can anticipate a small window and put it there. Mac Jones can do that for you. You can scheme him on deep ball throws down the field. He doesn't have the arm talent of Trey Lance or Justin Fields. Doesn't have the movement ability of those two quarterbacks. But within a heavily schemed offense, which is what Kyle Shanahan's system is, there's no question he can be a productive player. I look at Fields because of the things we're talking about. The intangibles, one. I go back to the Clemson game when he took that shot in the ribs. Came right back in the football game. I think that creates energy for your football team. I think he's strong and tough in the pocket. There's plays that we're going to show on the matchup show next week of Justin Fields play against Indiana. A good linebacker gets free, and it's an arm tackle inside the pocket. He has that physical element. Also as a ball carrier. Now, you understand, I view Justin Fields maybe a little differently, John. I think he is a pocket thrower that you can scheme on design runs because of his physical traits. No question. Where I think that shows up in the NFL, 3rd and 2 to 6, and inside the low red zone, which is a plus 10-yard line and in. I think that's where you'll see. You saw it at Ohio State too, where Justin Fields becomes more of an offensive weapon because of his ball carrier traits, his ball carrier vision, and his physicality. He does have the arm talent. There's no question about it. The deep ball accuracy jumps off the film. Now, the one thing I've heard about Justin Fields is he waits too long for his primary read to show. Okay, you can see that in some instances, but is that a product of his offense at Ohio State? That's a question I ask because John, you've watched their games. It is a vertical-based offense with a lot of option routes, or I call wide receiver convergence. I think at times Justin Fields is waiting for those routes to show. Okay, but again, put him in a schemed offense. If you put him in San Francisco with that run game element he brings and that physical element he brings to your offense, I think it'd be a great match. I would have a hard time passing on Justin Fields at number 3 overall. I would. But I understand if Kyle thinks that Mac Jones is a better fit. With Trey Lance, I put Trey Lance at 4. Okay? I put Trey Lance at 4. I think, again, the intangibles he brings. Very good decision maker. Can see the field very well. Through pro-style play-action concepts. Does bring that physical element as a runner. Excellent deep ball thrower. Okay, in terms of what they do down the field vertically at North Dakota State, which will transfer. And I could see him going to Atlanta at 4. You talk about Arthur Smith's offense and how it helped Ryan Tannehill. Now put a quarterback who has higher level traits projecting out than Ryan Tannehill. I think that'd be a great fit. I really do. And Atlanta's an interesting team in this draft, John.
Yes, you're
going to have a lot of options. That could be a quarterback. That could be Kyle Pitts. That could be that could be an offensive tackle. You don't know that yet. We understand that Matt Ryan in his contract, but I'd have a hard time there too passing on a quarterback. Because I would say in that building is that we're never going to draft here again. We're not going to draft in the top 5 again. The reason we're not is we're going to draft our quarterback who can develop under Matt Ryan and be our eventual starter, and we can have, solidified that position for years to come.
Yeah, and I think I think it's a definite option they have to strongly consider for that reason. It's funny about you say about Justin Fields, because I was going to ask you this, because when I watch him and when I watch as a fan, it's going to be different than when I watch trying to analyze. when I watch trying to analyze, but some of this is the same because you see him holding the ball, but then when you study it, when you go back and watch, it's like, okay, well, who's actually ready to catch who's ready for him to throw to now? I feel like sometimes not only he got greedy, but Ryan Day got greedy. And I think there were like in the Northwestern game, there were a couple times like he's got checkdowns available, but he sees the corner sinking, but he also knows that Chris Olave can still win on this route if he gets to here. So then it's like, so I see that. I saw that happen a lot. And that's why I'm saying, is it processing speed or sometimes with him, is it greed? And, and I think there's probably a little bit of both, but I do think that, and again, I think Ryan Day, in the Indiana game, he got really greedy because he kept trying to go downfield against a blitz that they couldn't stop. And I will say this, as a fan, I was tearing my hair out and I was yelling, it's like, the short stuff is working, get back to it, but let's go on from there. So I'm not that I'm still upset about that win, but I do think that greed played into it. And that's where I wonder with him, is it X or is it Y with him?
Well, I have no question that Justin Fields can process the pocket, from the pocket and process. He can. He can get from 1 to 2. He can get from 1 to 2 to 3. You've seen it on the film. And again, you're looking at the traits. If we put him in our system and coach him and give him reps and show him how fast the NFL game is and how fast you have to process, and understand that if you're running flat 7, which is flat corner, and the corner's sinking, you come off it now and throw the flat.
Right.
Okay, and that's just reps. That's just pro coaching. And I would be the same way if I had Chris Olave running a deep corner.
Right.
I want to take it. I want to throw it. I want to.
And Olave didn't play on that Northwestern game, so I shouldn't say it. But but they still there were guys that are out there that are really good. And I definitely saw it. In fact, there's one time it was a cover 2, corner sinking. The outlet's open right now. You get it to him, you got a chance to run. But I can tell I've watched them long enough to know they want the big play all the time. Right. And you can't do that. You can't do that in the NFL.
Well, it's part of quarterbacking at the younger levels. I mean, you see it every Friday night in high school, obviously. Not as much as in the college game. I mean, more than in the college game. But again, that's the growth process of playing that position in the National Football League. Those things will come. What you can't do, you can't teach the physical element, the size, the arm talent. I call those uncoachable traits, right?
Right.
Because these are elite prospects we're talking about. These are top 5 quarterbacks. We're going to be first-round players. So those are the uncoachable traits that you can't just develop in your system. You simply can't do it. Okay, but what you can do is take those traits within your system and create that growth and developmental path to where it becomes faster. And that's what we're looking at here. Look, there's clips from Trevor Lawrence's tapes where the footwork is off, the accuracy is up and down on boundary throws. Okay, that can be coached. You can't coach his arm talent. You just can't. You can't. You have it or you don't. So again, it goes back to traits. And that's why I brought that up with Justin Herbert last year. I wrote that piece at ESPN this week with the comps. My comp for Justin Fields was Justin Herbert.
I know. I saw that.
Because I think they both had the physical tools and the traits. When you put them in a pro passing offense with talent around them and use those traits. You saw with Justin Herbert last year how many schemed vertical throws they had.
Right.
They were taking shots down the field. How many deep end breakers that played to his arm talent, his ability to anticipate and put the ball on the upfield shoulder. And then you saw the movement ability with Justin Herbert. Some scheme runs, but also the off-schedule plays to get outside the pocket and the strength within the pocket. I think that's so important in today's NFL because the pocket is going to get crowded. There's going to be people at your feet. There's going to be defensive ends that get a hand on you. Are you strong enough to work through that arm tackle, slide up in the pocket, reset your throwing window, and drive the ball at location? A lot that goes into it, but those traits I see with Justin Fields and Justin Herbert.
I heard that name compared to him from somebody else I talked to earlier this week.
Support for this podcast comes from PayPal. Small business owners, turn your smartphone into a cash register. PayPal QR codes are the safe and easy way to get paid in store, and they deliver the same security and trust PayPal is known for online, in person. Even if you're a cash-only business, with PayPal QR codes, you can accept credit or debit with everyday low fees. There's no additional hardware or software needed. Generate your unique QR code from the PayPal app and display it on your device or print it to display in store. Customers scan your code with their PayPal app. You only need your smartphone. Learn more at paypal.com/us/getqrcode.
Hey everyone, I want to tell you about a fun new offer from Monkey Knife Fight that can enhance any sports experience, whether you're at a game, on your couch, or in a bar. It's a daily fantasy sports league that is easy to play. You can sign up on monkeyknifefight.com. Yes, it's monkeyknifefight.com. Use promo code JKR and play games such as More or Less. Will an NBA player score more or less than a listed point total? You can do the same in baseball. Will a pitcher have more or less strikeouts than a given amount, etc.? It's fun, man. And every Friday, it's Home Run Derby. Bet on 3 guys who hit home runs that night. All 3 hit one, you share in the prize pool. Choose from any sport from NASCAR to UFC and even League of Legends. And of course, once football rolls back around, there will be even more fun prop bets. This is daily sports betting designed for the average fan to use their knowledge and have some fun. Sign up now at monkeyknifefight.com. That's monkeyknifefight.com. Use promo code JKR. That's promo code JKR. Let's go to linebacker, because I think that's a definite area they want to address. And you had a really good comp in this player comp for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, which was Shaq Thompson, whom this group drafted a couple years ago in Carolina. Why do you compare him to him, and what do you see in Koramoah as an NFL prospect? And I'm going to, before you answer that, I talked to somebody earlier this week who their comment was, if you put a linebacker, we're going to run at him. You put him at safety, we're going to throw at him. In other words, he wasn't sure where exactly, he felt he was a linebacker, but wasn't sure if he was too small for a linebacker, but maybe just too big for a safety.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I do think some teams could look at him as a safety. If you're playing a cover 3 system, could it be a strong safety? Your box, your overhang defender who drops to the curl. And when you play 3 match, he can get to the bottom hip and run with seams and corners with help over the top. I think he can do that stuff. I think he's best as an off the ball stacked linebacker / hybrid defender, because I think really what you're getting to with him, John, is where does he play in nickel and dime?
Right.
And where does he play nickel and dime? And I think that's where you're really going to see his traits. He's got explosive traits. He will strike you on contact. He's got second level range. Now, he's not a true cover guy, but can he match? When I talk about 3 match, can he match with someone underneath, be that vertical match defender? Sure he can. Not going to be in true man coverage situations. Then we get that's the thing we get to all the time, John. And we'll talk about that with safeties. It's one thing to cover down over a slot when you're centering pressure. Okay. It's another thing to cover Cole Beasley on 3rd and 2 to 6. Okay. That's completely different. All right. You can cover down as a safety. There's no question. But being a true slot defender, I think that gets thrown around a little too loosely because they're different things.
Right.
That's why you have slot corners to match up to Cole Beasley. But getting back to Owusu-Koramoah, I really like him. I do. I think you have to find a place for him. I think he's your weak side linebacker. Okay. Someone that can scrape to the football. You don't want him taking on ISO blocks all day. I understand it, because what is he, 215? Somewhere around there, 215.
215, 220, yeah.
The key term I use with him, John, he's got disruptive traits. Disruptive plays win football games. Those are impact plays. Guys that can be schemed on pressures. You can scheme him on pressures. Guys that can be that overhang defender for you in your nickel or dime situations, because that's your guy that cuts the ball off on the edge. Whether it's a toss, whether it's a run that bounces, whether it's a screen outside, whether it's a ball in the flat. You have to have that player to cut off the ball on the edge. And he's got the traits, the speed, the ability to strike on contact to do that for you. He's got what I call forward ability, John. Okay, forward ability is someone you want who plays downhill. You keep the ball in front of you. That's where you see those traits. You don't want him playing with the ball behind you. You don't, okay? But that forward ability, he can do that for you. I do think he has first-round traits. I think the system matters. How you scheme for him matters. Because this is a perfect example of a player who could be labeled as that hybrid linebacker / safety. You have to utilize him correctly.
Do you think a Del Rio defense would be good for him?
I think it would. I think it would, especially in sub. Because I think there's a lot of things you can do with him in sub. And especially on the pressures. How you scheme him on pressures. Being a second-level blitzer, that's obviously not on the line of scrimmage, the second-level blitzer. Right. That you occupy blockers and get him a free run at the quarterback. And then you see that short area burst to close and make plays.
And, it's funny, because I feel like his energy flash. You can feel his energy when you're watching him on film. Zaven Collins, what do you think about him?
I like Zaven Collins, 6'4", 260 pounds.
He's a big fella, man, and he can move.
An easy, fluid mover at the second level. When I watch Zaven Collins, okay, you ever been to a high school game on Friday night, and there's a Division I football player in the field, right away, right? You can just tell because of their movement traits, their height, weight, and speed, their disruptive ability. That was Zaven Collins, playing in a non-Power 5 conference. You turn on the tape, he stands out. The one tape I really like in Zaven Collins was against a Power 5 opponent, Oklahoma State. How he pressured. They schemed him off the edge. They used delayed stunts inside to get him through the A and B gaps. You can see him get sideline to sideline. Another player with disruptive ability, and he's good in the pass game too, because he has that length and size. He can cloud those throwing lanes underneath. Has him as a hook.
Saw that a lot.
Yeah, has him a hook defender inside. He's got that length. Now you're reducing that throwing window for the quarterback. He had 2 picks last year. I think 2 pick sixes actually. One to win a football game against SMU, one against South Florida. I think he is an ascending talent. And I think he plays hard too. And that's the thing. I think there's effort on the film. And every time I watch the film, that's probably the coaching perspective. I want to see guys that run the football. I want to see guys that play with that extra gear, that high motor. And you get that with Zaven Collins. I think he's a very interesting prospect. I do think that's the range where he's probably going to go, John.
Yeah.
Starting that back half of the first round, whether it's 19 with Washington or into the 20s, I think that's where he fits.
Because he's got that size, and do you feel like is he a 3-4 outside backer? Is he a 4? Do you think he'd be a 4-3 end? Do you think he can be a 4-3 outside backer, which is what they would want here?
I think you could put him as a 4-3 Sam linebacker. I think you could do that. I think that's a guy that can line up over the tight end and under fronts, a guy who can scheme on edge pressures. Can he be utilized like a Rashaan Evans out of Alabama, who's with the Tennessee Titans now? Rashaan Evans, coming off his Alabama tape, there was times when Nick Saban would scheme him as an edge rusher. And here's the thing, John, about today's NFL. We're going to do this on our draft shows for matchup. There's so many multiple fronts now, right? Everyone runs multiple fronts. So guys it caters to defenders with versatility and explosive traits because you can scheme them off twists and stunts. Right. You use tilted fronts to get a guy like Zaven Collins a one-on-one. Maybe loop it inside against the guard. There's ways to do it. We saw it last year with Washington, with Allen and Chase Young, how they twisted and stunted those guys to get them one-on-ones, get Chase Young favorable matchups to get home to the quarterback. Washington does that. Everyone in the league does it. So you're looking for guys who have the physical traits, but also the explosive traits and that short area speed to get home to the quarterback. And now your job as a defensive line coach, as a defensive coordinator, is put him in those positions where you can maximize those traits.
Yeah, I really like Zaven Collins a lot, just because to see a guy that size. Now I know he's not facing all high-level Division I talent passing games all the time, but he moved well in coverage. I felt the other guy is Jamin Davis, and when I was just my little 2 cents, he covers very well. He had some nice coverage situations against Kyle Pitts. But I'm also not sold on him in the run as a run defender just yet. What do you see out of him?
I think he's a guy with a ton of upside. 1 year production basically out of University of Kentucky. If you look at his testing numbers from his pro day, they jump. Okay, he's got explosive traits based on the testing numbers and based on the tape. He does impact the passing game. I think you have to do that if you're going to be a stack linebacker in today's NFL. Because you go back to the Super Bowl, and that's how we're doing it for the matchup show. We always look at the Super Bowl because, look, everyone else in the league does too. What does Tampa Bay have defensively? They have a front 4 that can be schemed. And with 4 guys get home to the quarterback, they have 2 stacked linebackers, Levante David and Devin White, that have second-level range, can get sideline to sideline, cut off the ball in the run game, but also impact the passing game. You look at that Super Bowl when Tampa played 2-man, it was Levante David versus Travis Kelce. Right. Did a really good job. Okay, you need linebackers that can cover with help over the top. If you're playing 2-man, you got 2 deep over the top, man underneath. But guys who have the traits to close in the football, to stay snugged up to the hip of a wide receiver or tight end underneath, be able to zone match in coverage, also be able to pressure. But yes, you do have to play the run game. You have to. I mean, we always do that, John, and I'm guilty of that too. When we talk about defensive tackles and defensive ends, linebackers will be schemed and pressure. It's all about the pass game. If you can't play the run game, hard to get in the field, right? Then you become a rotational player who becomes a sub-package player. And a lot of times for young players, that does happen, though. That is their primary role early in the career. You play on third downs, you play on special teams because of your speed, your ability to hit and tackle in space. But you have to be able to play the run game. And with a guy like Davis, I think he's a weak side backer. He's a weak side backer who can scrape to the football. Same thing we talked about earlier with the Owusu-Koramoah. Guys that have those traits, you want to keep them a little clean so they can get to the football. You don't want to be your Sam linebacker where all the traffic is. You got people at your feet. There's a lot of bodies to work through. You want the guys that can scrape to the football because then you see those traits in that short area closing.
And I think with him, the one thing I liked about him in the run game was he had good vision for where it's going. I just felt like he sometimes either didn't get there, maybe whether it's the scheme, attacking it the way maybe you would want him to, but I felt like his vision was really good with it. So it feels like there's traits that you can develop with that if you're able to keep guys off of him. So, where do you think Micah Parsons stacks in all this?
I do think Micah Parsons, if you're just basing it on the traits and the tape, he's the top linebacker in this class.
Right.
I believe that. I think he's got, and that piece I did the other day, in terms of finding a comp, I settled on Darius Leonard because I think that's the type of impact ability Micah Parsons has. The short area speed, the lateral change of direction, the physical play style. He can be schemed up in the NFL. And even if he wasn't, if even let's say he was in Lovie Smith's defense, Lovie Smith's old Bears defense here in Chicago, and he played that Lance Briggs role, I think he would clean up the stat sheet. I do. He's got that ability, and he's got the height, weight, and speed measurables as well. I mean, he is a big-time player at that position, and I'm interested to see where he goes. Obviously mock drafts are mock drafts, but sometimes you see him in the top 10, sometimes you see him in the middle of the first, sometimes you see him at the end of the first. I don't know where he's going to go, but in terms of the traits and the competition he played against in the college level, there's a play that we might use for the matchup show. Obviously, Micah Parsons opted out of last year, but 2 years ago against Ohio State on a zone read scheme when Justin Fields pulls the ball, Micah Parsons has to change direction. He immediately cuts off Justin Fields. And that's against a high-level talent, Justin Fields. He has that change of direction ability you also need at the position. He's a high-level prospect. There's no question.
And the last thing I want to ask you about are safeties, because this team still needs one. Now, they may end up signing Trey Boston after the draft.
Right.
But I think they're going to look for one in this draft. Who are a couple names to watch at that position?
Well, if you're talking about a single high safety, I'd look at Andre Cisco from Syracuse. Now, he's coming off an injury from last season. But Andre Cisco, I think in 22 or 24 college games, John, has 13 interceptions. Wow. Interceptions are hard to get. They don't just fall from the sky. Okay, I'm the perfect example. I played 7 years. I got 4. Not a lot, right? So they're hard to get. And I think he's got good range from the post. He's got split field range, too, when you're playing your cover 2 and your cover 4 shells in the back end. But I think he's a guy with range and ball skills. And that's hard to find. It's hard to find true post safeties. And I'm not saying he is a true post safety in the NFL, but he's shown that on his college tape. And that's a guy you can get on day 2 of the draft. And the high-level ball skills, those win games, those change momentum of games. And guys that can protect you over the top, be that gatekeeper in the middle of the field. Richie Grant is someone I really like out of Central Florida. Now, Richie Grant does not have, high-level first-round traits, but, he's just a really good football player. He can play split field for you as a cover 2 or quarter safety. He can roll down the run front. He brings a physical element to the box. He's got enough ability, like we talked about, that ability to cover down over a slot because he's very patient. He's a technician when he's in coverage. And I just love his play style, his effort. I think there's a place for him in the NFL. There's no question about it. Javon Holland's interesting out of Oregon. Javon Holland opted out last year, but another guy who's got playmaking traits. He's a punt returner. And anytime you have a punt returner, that shows you, one, that they have ball skills. They have a physical element to them as well. Javon Holland at Oregon, he played some corners, also played in the slot. And that's interesting to me because you're seeing that more in the NFL. Yeah. When you play your 3 safety sub packages, who your slot defender is. And again, it doesn't mean you're a true man-to-man slot defender, but you can be schemed. He's very good as that overhang defender. Short area speed, makes a lot of plays in space, made a lot of plays in the football. I think he can match underneath and carry. Elijah Molden's a name I'll bring up. Okay, Elijah Molden, he's listed as a corner out of Washington. I wrote about him in my piece this week. I comped him to Buda Baker because he's got that urgency, John. And that's why I look for all these safeties have. But Elijah Molden, it really jumps. And if I'm a secondary coach, I want a safety or a slot defender who's got a ton of urgency to their game, that they fly to the football. And I don't know what Elijah Molden ran in his pro day. I don't care because he's got game speed. Right. It shows in the film. Again, not a true man-to-man cover guy, but if you're talking about someone that can be schemed up in your defense to be disruptive and to be a tone setter, that's another thing. You got to have tone setters in your secondary. It doesn't matter what level you're talking about. When your next opponent turns in the film, you need to force them to sit up straight in their chair in the meeting room, those wide receivers, and say, I don't know about this game.
Right.
Playing these guys. I don't know if we really want to see them because you're so urgent to the football, because you play with speed in the back end, because you're physical at the point of attack and you strike on contact. You need tone setters in your secondary. I think Elijah Molden could be one of those players for you.
Matt, awesome insight. And it's funny with some of the articles you've written, you also had one earlier where you were projecting receivers to the best fits, and you had Rashad Bateman for Washington because of that size. And I do think that a big receiver is on the table for them at some point. I don't know I don't know how high, but that style, and your comp was Allen Robinson for him, which is perfect. And a guy that I think is just a fantastic receiver. So I think that's on the table at some point. So I did want to let people know about that. You like Matt's insight. This is why you subscribe to ESPN Plus and you watch the NFL matchup show. As Sal says, it's the best matchup show on TV. But when is the show airing next week?
We have 2 shows coming up, which is really cool. They're both in prime time. I don't have the exact dates yet, but I mean the time, I know the dates. April 21st is our first show. And then April 27th, the week of the draft, is our second show. And I'll be back in studio first time in a year, over a year. Wow. So we're excited about that, to be back together with Sal and Greg. And our draft show is, it's different than the regular season matchup shows because it's not so scheme heavy.
Right.
We're breaking down Washington's defense, like Greg did a couple times this past year in the matchup show. Right. There's a lot of detail involved in that. This is more about the player and the traits and how they project to the NFL. I'll tell you right now what I'm doing with Justin Fields. I'm showing the deep ball throw against Clemson when he has to reset his window.
I appreciate you throwing that deep. I appreciate you showing that play too. I like that one.
Yeah, he looks off the route into the boundary, has to slide, reset his window, and there you see the arm talent and the deep ball accuracy. And look at that throw. I'm going to look at the seam ball he threw to the tight end versus Alabama early in the national championship game. Again, that's an NFL pocket. I want to show quarterbacks in NFL situations. And it doesn't get more NFL than playing against Clemson, playing against Bama inside the pocket when you have people around you and you still have to reset that window and make a good throw. So the first throw, you see the deep ball accuracy, the arm talent. The second throw, you see the processing, again, the movement, the ability to hang in the pocket and bring that physical element and throw with more touch, pace, and location. I'm also going to show that second reaction run against Indiana because I think that shows his, again, strength in the pocket. And then you see the ball carrier vision and the toughness in the open field to create off schedule as a runner because he brings that to your football team. So we're going to do Mac Jones and Justin Fields to start off our first show. We're going to hit on Kyle Pitts, the wide receivers, the safeties in our first show. On our second show, we'll go the other quarterbacks, plus the wide receivers. And we're going to do the wide receivers a little differently, John. Like you talked about with Rashad Bateman, my comp for Allen Robinson. We're going to group Rashad Bateman and Terrace Marshall from LSU together because we think they can be utilized or deployed like Robinson or Michael Thomas, because they're boundary X receivers who can also create mismatches from a slot alignment. And the other grouping of wide receivers with Jalen Waddle, Kadarius Toney, Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore, Amari Rodgers from Clemson. We look at those receivers as motion movement guys. They can also be schemed on manufactured touches, jet sweeps, fly sweeps, reverses, screens. That is a big part of NFL offenses today because they are sudden, they have dynamic traits. And with Jalen Waddle, he might be the most explosive offensive player in this draft.
Yep. I would agree with that. Matt, fantastic. Always appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for joining me.
All right, John. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
This episode is brought to you by Mortal Kombat. Are you ready to fight? On April 23rd, don't miss the action event of the year when Mortal Kombat, the worldwide phenomenon, comes to life. Mortal Kombat is in theaters and on HBO Max April 23rd. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent present.
Hello, it's Tyler Roman, former NFL scout and host of the Roman on the League podcast. Every week, I update my mock draft that not only looks at the best players available, but the needs for all first-round teams. The draft board keeps changing with all the movement this year, so tune into my show, Roman Around the League. That's ROMAN Around the League podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check out all of the great shows from Empire Media.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Matt for joining me, and thank you for listening. I'll be back with 2 more episodes this week, including a bonus one on Wednesday. Talk to you next time.